Everybody give a hand for the Super Bowl champ, the Hitman, Gary Fencik.
Let me see that ring.
Collector's Cave bringing them out. We appreciate you guys.
There it is. Let's go.
There's the ring.
Let's go, 45.
There's the ring.
It's Gary here, Mr. Clean. They call me Hitman. Don't know what they mean.
Dang.
You can finish the rest if you'd like. I've probably done that a couple times in your life.
I think I proved decades ago I can't sing or dance, and I'm not going to try to disprove that.
You are aware that it was, as you know, I was 12 years old, Gary Fencik, and I remember coming down on Super Bowl morning and saying to whoever was going to listen to me, there is 0% chance the Bears were losing today. 0. You guys were that good. That's what it was. You felt the same thing against the Rams. I was a little bit nervous against the Giants, and then things worked out beautifully.
You know, the Rams were a good team, but they they really didn't have a good passing game, and so we really focus on that running. But when, for the Super Bowl, you're so nervous that you're going to screw up in the biggest game of your life, and that's 2 weeks because the second week you're down in New Orleans, but we'd already beaten them in the second game of the year,
right?
And we felt pretty confident, but you never know. I mean, hey, sometimes things we fumbled on the first series. Yep. And all of a sudden gave them all this momentum.
Right.
And you're like, holy smokes, what's going on?
Yep.
But by the time we got to I didn't play the entire fourth quarter, but by the time you got into the third quarter, I remember I was looking around the Superdome going, you know what, no one has ever held a team without a touchdown. It was like 4th and goal,
right?
And they scored, but it was like a pretty hollow moment. But everybody, it wasn't just I was with Richard Dent yesterday. I mean, he had an unbelievable game. The whole defensive line was just, I would take like 2 steps and go, hey, the ball better come out because they're going down. And all the backups got to play and made touchdowns and fumble recoveries, and so you got in there and. It's such a life-changing moment in your life. You don't really appreciate it until like today. People are going, wow. And people ask me, "Are you? Do you want another Super Bowl team in Chicago?" Look, I'm a season ticket holder. I'm ready.
Yes,
I'm really ready.
No one's ever going to replace the legacy of the '85 Bears. Period.
No, it's transcendent.
Yeah.
Honestly, when I went to London a few years ago for the Bears game at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, met a lot of Bears fans from all over the world, and NFL fans in general, but it was like a Bears fan takeover there. I think Jim Plunkett was signing autographs, and the next table was Charles Tillman, and I felt bad for Jim Plunkett because it was all Bears fans that were just there to see Charles Tillman. And every Bears fan that I talked to, from around the country, at different countries, whether it's Mexico, England, Germany, wherever, it was the same story each time. Either they or their parents started out as Bears fans because of the '85 Bears. For you, what is that like to be a part of something that kind of pushed past just where we're from here in the USA and became an international kind of sensation?
I've been very fortunate. I just retired from my second career, and I travel around the world. I went to the UK, almost moved there. But to your point, I would be in Australia, and we were taking a helicopter ride from Melbourne, and everybody has a phone. And so the Australian pilot was a real football fan, and my partner goes, hey, this guy actually played for the Bears in the '85 Bears. Well, I'm not that big a guy, right? Anybody can say that. And before the advent of mobile phones, you could lie and say you were anybody, right? Exactly. And people couldn't check. Now they can check in a heartbeat. So we dropped down for lunch, and he checked me out. When I came back, he goes, you're the real deal, the '85 Bears. And I ended up sending him a jersey and all that. But that's happened around the world. We had some Chinese government officials come in from Beijing, and they had done their homework on me. You a football player, So yeah, it's a good icebreaker, that's for sure. By the way, before
go ahead.
So I listened to you guys.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry for the yelling.
My son is in LA, huge Bears fan. He listens, and so it's a pleasure to be with you guys. The last couple of weeks, though, I've listened to everybody's got, okay, what are they going to do if they trade and all that? So now it's like, well, they actually got the two players. Most people, well, certainly, if they hadn't picked Williams as the first pick, could you imagine?
Yeah.
That might have been a riot in Chicago.
There would have been.
There would have been.
And especially our luck as Bears, it would have been like, he turns into the next Mahomes. We get the guy who turns into nothing.
Yep.
But fortunately, really two high-quality picks last night. And I know you could get more picks if you drop down, but at some point, and I'm sure you know this, Corey, as well as I do, you got to have some studs. You got to have some guys who, just have the ability to go from fourth to fifth gear. I had Walter. You would have, McMahon if he could stay healthy.
Yeah.
But when Dan Hampton joined the Bears, he changed our team. He changed the way our defense played. He made the offensive line better because he just had a motor that was unbelievable. But you need guys like that.
Yeah, and talking about that, the defensive line, you talked about Richard Dent, you talked about Dan Hampton, how that made that easier. And it reminds me a lot when I played the rushing cover. Talk about how important that is, how you guys work together, and how that allowed you guys on the back end to be successful with that rushing cover.
Well, you don't have a good 4-3 defense unless you have a good 4.
Exactly.
But
front 4,
I played half my career as free safety, and you're like, whoa, they can't stop these guys. Or, you're in the huddle going, hey, I'm across from 4 of the defensive line going, we really need it.
Oh, yeah.
And they're looking and going, no kidding. You know what I mean? But they know. And
Exactly.
they know it all starts up front.
Yep.
And so, I'm sure you've gone all over this, but you still need to get another rush guy on the other side because people are going to check Sweat and they're going to say, we're going to chip him with a tight end or keep a back end.
Exactly.
And you got to keep him honest.
Yeah.
And that piece still hasn't, maybe it's been solved.
Yeah.
I have a lot of confidence in what's going on with the selections and with polls. I'm thinking about Atlanta.
Yep.
What a weird. And then you hear that they
signed Kirk Cousins, that big deal, and then get Penix.
Yeah, but then Cousins didn't know about this. And I go, wait a minute, who's down there? Ryan Pace.
Exactly.
He did that with the Bears.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's out of nowhere. You pay
nowhere.
this guy guaranteed money, and then all of a sudden you draft another quarterback that's older, 24 years old, and Michael Penix.
And you don't tell Cousins?
Yeah, that's
Very weird.
Well, you mentioned the pass rushers that the Bears need. A pass rusher just came off the board here at 57 to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Chris Braswell out of Alabama. I know some Bears fans were interested in trying to get him.
Yeah, and now at 58, Green Bay has taken the safety. Javon Bullard out of Georgia, number 2 guy on our board. So the Packers adding on to the back of their defense right now. Where do you size up this division, Gary Fencik?
Wow.
Where do you think the Bears are at?
Well, it's going to be really competitive, right? I think Minnesota, they got a lot of talent already, but now, you've got your future at quarterback. Maybe, Sam has something left in him from USC, but we'll see.
Yeah.
And then you've got, Detroit's for real.
Okay.
And you know what?
Yeah, they are.
I kind of look at Detroit like we felt after we lost the NFC Championship game in '84. We were crying in the locker room. It really hurt. And Ditka the next year in our first meeting basically said, second best isn't good enough. And it captured
Motivated
us.
you.
It really did. And I think it was good that we lost at least one game so you didn't go in there with too big a head. But I think Detroit's like that right now. They've got a lot of talent. They've got kind of, unless they've solved it, they've got the same issue where they need another defensive end rushing on the other side. Green Bay, all right, I'm scared that maybe they have another quarterback who's going to haunt the Bears for the next decade.
Nobody's here, and no one's watching online. The Miami game, were you guys maybe just had a little too much fun down on South Beach beforehand? I've heard some of the stories, perhaps, that was a thing.
I was always pretty strict and not going out.
He was worried about not making a mistake. The rest of the team was making.
But you got to look at the setup. We had beaten 2 weeks earlier the Dallas Cowboys. I was in my 10th year.
44-0.
We had never beaten the Dallas Cowboys in preseason, regular season, or postseason, and we beat them 44-0. And the next week we played the Falcons. We won 36-0. So we were,
You're riding high. You're riding high at that point.
And they played a great game. We played an awful one defensively. Yeah. Steve Fuller was our starter. McMahon was hurt. We finished the game at the end. Wow.
There you go.
There we go.
Burger,
Give this man some food, man.
So I think that we kind of set ourselves up a little bit. But again, came back and it was like, okay, we've lost this first game. We don't want to make the same mistake when we get to the playoffs because we were pretty close.
Tackle Blake Fisher going to the Texans. We're 2 away from the Lions being on the clock here.
So what are you guys thinking?
I'm
thinking defensive end or defensive tackle because that's an obvious need, right? You talked about opposite Sweat. Who is the option, right? Because you can double team one person. You need another option opposite him.
Yeah, but Corey, I think one of the keys is also developing younger players. And so you picked a second and third round pick last year at defensive tackle.
Yeah.
So do you have to admit that isn't working if you get a defensive tackle?
So the guy, Gervon Dexter, whose jersey's right there, I think he has a lot of talent. He came from a two-gap read and react scheme where he just didn't get off the football. He's a taller guy. He played with high pad level. And in college, you can get away with some of those things. Yeah. And then you come to the league, doesn't work out. He's been productive even despite playing with limited get-off and high pad level. I'm just hoping a guy that coached me, Eric Washington, who was here with Rob Marinelli and Lovie Smith, now is a defensive coordinator that's going to be exclusively working with that defensive line. I hope he really takes him under his wing and takes him to the next level because when Gervon Dexter, he ran under a sub-5. He has all the strength in the world, all the tools. If he can trust that, especially in that Tampa 2 scheme, and get off the football, he can really, elevate himself to the next level.
Yeah, I think that, we all talk about individual players, but I think the key is how are the units doing? And I think the secondary looks really good.
Linebacking core, great.
Linebacking core looks good.
Defensive line, that's kind of like the question mark, and that's what I've been telling them. They've been high on the center, but I think they have an option at center that can get them through the season that they feel confident with. Defensive end and defensive tackle, I don't feel that confident with it.
Yeah.
Do you like Brisker? You might know a little bit about that position.
I like him a lot. I think that he is, my biggest concern about him right now is he's had 2 concussions.
Exactly.
And if he gets a third one,
especially in this day and age.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you and Doug Plank were known for, laying your head on the line, no pun intended, honestly. And so with Brisker, it seems like that's just in his nature and the way he plays the game. So how hard is it to to pull that back and still be the effective player that got you to this point?
I think you make that adjustment. I only got knocked out one time. So I hit Earl Campbell. I had a 33-inch waist. He had a 34-inch thigh. I mean, it wasn't much of a – and I finished that game.
Yeah.
But I think that –
I think your guy Hamp told me once that Campbell was the toughest running back he ever faced.
Well, because he wasn't looking to make a move on you. He was just going to run
your face over.
And I actually finished that game, and we lost. So you roll up to safety, and I ended up just getting run over the last 3 plays. Who's the hammer? Who's the nail? I think I got the message. But I think with Brisker, you make adjustments so you can't hit with your helmet like you used to. The thing that blew me away is that you can, as a defensive back, chop the pulling guard or tackle, and that person may weigh 150 pounds more than you.
Right.
Yep.
And so what are you supposed to do? And if I was playing and you had a big guy there, it's like, I'm just going to chop him out because everybody's knees are the same size, and they will never come back at you.
Oh, yeah.
They will.
Big trees fall down.
They do. They do fall down.
Chop them down, baby.
Would you want to play in today's game with the rules?
For 10 or 15 million? Hell yeah.
Right? You're like a heartbeat.
Today's rules and today's money.
Yeah.
But okay, let's take the money out of it. If the way you were allowed to play then versus how you're allowed to play now versus the benefit of maybe you stay a little healthier, but it's also, it seems to me like guys are out there trying to figure out exactly like what they can do and can't do, which is also dangerous.
Well, it's a passing game now. And so, you don't have fullbacks, and so it's 3 or 4 wide. And you have to have a safety, whether it's strong or free. You have some cover ability, which wouldn't have been my strength, to be honest with you. But I think every player adjusts to what happens. And, it's almost like, okay, people would ask me, do you think the 46 defense would still work? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, we were putting pressure. I mean, I think one of the keys is that whether it's a zone blitz or whatever, you need to get pressure on the quarterback and take away his rhythm and make him make a quick decision. And you can see that a lot of quarterbacks don't have that ability, but the good ones do. And when the good ones, you're playing Hall of Fame type quarterbacks, you're in the huddle going, man, these guys are good.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, wow, they got timing routes, and
it's like playing Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers, like playing against him. Like, you always love playing against him because if you could beat him, you felt so great about that because of the talent. And just when that ball came out, it was just a different thing that you ever seen compared to any other quarterback.
Yeah, you had that with John Elway or Montana. Or I was doing radio for the Bears, and the Bears played a preseason game in Berlin against the 49ers. Yep. And I got to watch the 49ers practice, and it just looked weird. I couldn't really describe why, but I was watching the precision of the routes and the throws from Montana to Rice. I don't think I've ever seen anything that smooth, right?
Yeah, it's a different beast. So, Gary, I don't know if you remember, Carmen, you got something?
Well, the Lions have taken a cornerback with their latest selection, Enos Rakestraw, out of Missouri, going to Detroit after the Bills took Cole Bishop as safety as well. So we're getting a little run on the back end of the defense right now. Second corner that the Lions have taken here. So
getting a little closer to the Bears pick.
What are they doing? What are they doing, Gary? Right? They see the Bears and they have one of the most talented wide receiver core on paper right now. So what do? You stack up on the defensive backs, right? Safeties, the corners, because obviously you got to cover these guys. So I think that's what you're kind of seeing in the division. Yeah. They're really trying to stack that up because the Bears on paper, they probably have the most talented wide receiver trio right now.
I think if you just look, where's the money now? It's get a pass rush.
Yep.
Get a receiver. Obviously, quarterback is the most important one, but you got to be able to cover.
Exactly.
And so whether it's a really fast safety or another corner, you can't have enough of them. Exactly. Because they're not that big and they get hurt more too, right?
Exactly.
Well, let me ask you this. You say it's a passing league. He mentions Aaron Rodgers. The Bears now bring in Caleb Williams, obviously a highly decorated college player, Heisman Trophy winner. Some say one of the best prospects since Andrew Luck or Peyton Manning. Do you see that? You said you were a season ticket holder. When Justin Fields' last game at Soldier Field, the entire stadium chanting, "We want Fields." People felt very strongly about keeping him here in this city. Ryan Poles chooses to move on for Caleb Williams. How did you feel about that move, and how do you feel about Caleb Williams transitioning to the NFL?
It's always a transition. I do think, though, that he won the Heisman Trophy winner his junior year, and then he didn't struggle, but he didn't do as well. Their team offensively, their line wasn't very good. Their defense has been bad, I think, ever since I've been watching them. And so he had to go through a really difficult period. And so people go, well, what's it going to be like? Is he going to get used to the Chicago crowd and the newspaper? I got to tell you, LA's bigger than Chicago. and USC, because of the changes, the Rams leaving to go to St. Louis and all that, the USC is almost like a NFL team. Their coverage is like the NFL. So he's gone through an awful lot, and I think he's matured a lot. But watching him, you would just go, wow. That's the seeing the field and the side arm throws and just being cool. That's not easy to do. And I think that Justin Fields was a great teammate for all those guys. But in my view, he wasn't going to take you to the Super Bowl. And he didn't, maybe you can throw deep, but he wasn't good at the timing routes. And I'm sure that those wide receivers got frustrated saying, I'm open. It's a timing route. You should have thrown that ball, not I see it, then I throw.
Him and Darnell Mooney were best friends. I don't think they'll ever speak again.
Well, you never saw him. Right, you're right.
Mooney,
he's like the invisible man.
Until Mooney got paid, and so it was like, all right, no harm, no
foul. It worked out. I'm with Kirk Cousins now.
Which was super interesting, by the way, that, this guy had, in general, a terrible year, but we're going to give him $26 million guaranteed because, in essence, they're saying that the Bears offense, the quarterback, didn't do well enough. I don't think that's completely fair to Fields. And by the way, I've said 100 times, I think that Justin still has a chance to be successful in the league, for the record. Ravens are taking tackle Roger Rosengarten, pick 62 overall. 49ers are on the clock, then the Chiefs, then the third round, then the Bears at 75. Let's go.
Real quick before, because I know we're going to let you take off here soon, but I'd be remiss if I did. Well, I
can't let Gary go.
I mean, we can have him here. We can have him up here all night. And we certainly appreciate you coming out here to Joe's on Wheat Street for all these great Bears fans and spending time with us. but I would be remiss if I
for him.
Yes, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about Doug Plank as well. In doing this here the last few years, I've actually been able to interview him a few times, and Doug, you get him on the phone and he'll trade stories with you for an hour and a half. He makes me look calm, and I've got a lot of energy.
He does have a lot of energy.
I have a lot of love for Doug Plank, and he's told me a lot of stories about you. But I'd love to hear you tell me some stories or a story about Doug Plank and your relationship with him. Obviously, you two being the Hitmen, and your reputation for what you did for this league and the franchise speaks for itself.
I guess I'll start my story with Doug, that in the NFL, I had some wonderful position coaches, but they really weren't good on teaching fundamentals. There was almost an assumption that you'll pick it up, or that's not my thing. And you're like, wait a minute, I was a wide receiver at Yale. I mean, I'm coming out of the Ivy League. I need help. And so who helped me? I watched Doug Plank. And I watched Craig Clemens, who was a first-round draft choice, who I ended up replacing. But, Doug would admit he doesn't have the biggest physical skills, but, man, he brought the wood. And I think for me to be able to play, is there another?
No, I'm right where you're at. I can't wait to ask this question after you're done talking.
So I would say that I just emulated Doug in that when you really get good in the NFL, it's when you're no longer thinking. You know your assignment and you just react. And it's a second or two maybe. And I started at strong safety where if you pulled a guard, you needed to get up to this magic place and drop your shoulder and turn the play in. And if you didn't get there and the guard turned, it was
done.
Like I was just dancing with him, right? And so we'd be in the fourth quarter, and we had some really good quarterbacks back then, like Bob Avellini. And so we would be out of a game, and Doug would look and say, time to have fun. And we would just start nailing guys. And the one thing, I played with Doug the phone, which was just an honor. He was the last Bear player to actually play for George Halas. And, Doug was, plus 10 years. And he said, look, they may not know. We're going to play this game, and we may not win, but they're going to know that they played the Chicago Bears. And so it was that type of attitude.
Love it.
That you just bring it on.
Man.
And I'll tell you.
We need to bring that slogan back. That's a good one.
You talk about slogans. I think our slogan the last year with Neil Armstrong, who was a wonderful guy. He had young players, and he was coming from Minnesota when he was the defensive coordinator, and he had the Purple People Eaters and all that. We needed more discipline, which is what Ditka brought. But we played a game, and on Thanksgiving we lost. A guy walked off the field before the end of the half and went into the locker room. And we're like, okay, we lose the game, at least this guy's going to get fired. He didn't get fired. And I think our motto that year that was all over the locker room was whatever it takes. And somebody taped the "it takes," and our motto was "whatever." That's when you know the ship's going down.
Yep.
And then we got Ditka, and we were fortunate to retain Buddy Ryan, but Ditka reminds me a little bit of Campbell in Detroit.
Yeah, I like Campbell a lot.
Hey, you know what? We're doing this. We're going this way, and you're either on the bus or you're not. And when you start getting rid of guys, you go, wait a minute, that's a starter. We don't have someone better than that guy, but it's like, hey, he's not on the bus.
Chiefs moved up from 64 to 63, giving up a fifth-round pick to go down to the sixth round to do it. So, not sure. That's interesting. Just one pick move, 64 to 63 to take the tackle. Kingsley, anybody? As I butchered every name up here this morning.
I don't want to do it.
Samatai.
I'll look it up in a second to get it right.
Yeah.
Kingsley, congratulations. You're a Kansas City Chief, so Kansas City trying to get some protection here for Patrick Mahomes. But when you mentioned Doug and you're talking about playing as fast as possible. I mean, you guys were not big dudes. You had to have some football crazy gene to get yourself to play, and you weren't super fast either, but to play at the speed you needed to play and not being worried about what's going to happen to you.
Carm, he was a baller. Come on, man.
No, but
he was a football player, and
I understand. I'm trying to understand how you.
I'm shrinking by the year. By the way, I'm like getting smaller and smaller.
I'm not. I'm saying nothing negative. I'm just wondering how you got yourself in a headspace that this is what I'm going to do. This is what I have to do, and I'm going to go out there and do it.
You know what? I really do think that it was watching Doug just play with complete abandonment. I mean, just like you don't care if you get broken in two. And you know, when you get that freedom, it's just wow. And you're just smacking people. And you don't even realize it, but it's like, wow, you're just doing something that you almost were surprised you were capable of doing. I do think, though, that playing wide receiver at Yale made me a little better in terms of recognizing routes and patterns and reading quarterbacks. But there's just so much you can do. I mean, I would love to be able to redo my career. Now it's, you know, you're 12 months a year, and, you know, they'll make you breakfast, lunch, and dinner up at Hallis Hall. And
you get paid a lot more.
Yeah. But the ability of being the best that you can be, it's a short-lived opportunity, and I was just really lucky to be able to last as long as I did.
So, Gary, I don't know if you remember, when I was at Northwestern, Coach Fitz was our coach, Coach Fitzgerald. You came up and you talked to the team.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that. It was 06, 07, somewhere around there. And I always remember that. You came up there and you gave us a little motivational speech before the season. And that's something I always remember. You came in there, you got us fired up. And I just thought, man, you were so articulate, how you got your point across, and you really got us going and revved up. So I don't know if you remember that.
No, I do, but you know what I really remember from that with Coach Fitz? At the end of that, he wanted to meet with every senior to find out what you were going to do when you graduated from Northwestern. And I walked away going, you know what? That wasn't some made-up thing.
Exactly.
You know? That was Fitz, and I came away really impressed with that.
Yeah, because I think the biggest thing is, right, you continued your career. You got to your second phase besides just football. And I think that's a lot of times what the issue is with a lot of these guys that you play with. What is the transition, right? You went to a great school in Yale where obviously you had great connections, you were a smart guy, and you were able to get to that second phase. Sometimes guys don't always get that. So I think that was the great thing about Northwestern is I look at a lot of my teammates, which I'm sure you look at a lot of your teammates, they were successful in other areas besides football. And you got to commend that because you can't play football forever. And even if guys make a lot of money, at the end of the day, you have to do something.
What do you want to do?
Exactly.
You don't realize how long the rest of your life is.
Yeah, and you have to do something that you feel fulfilled with. And I always thought that was a great thing about Northwestern is the fact that education was important. Obviously, try to make the NFL if you can. But what's your plan B? And I think you can attest to that being from Yale and understanding the importance.
Corey, I think going to Northwestern, you're really going to a lot of different schools. I knew that it was a fluke that I was in the NFL. You don't go to an Ivy League school to say, oh yeah, I'm going to try out for, what are you talking about? But so I knew that I was going to be on a parallel path with my classmates that were going to law school, business school. They're all going to some school, and I was going to have to jump on that lane at some point. And I ended up going to Kellogg while I was playing, but that's as a result of breaking my arm, needing knee and ankle surgery, and going, you know what, maybe I should go at night.
Yeah, think about that next phase. And Kellogg is one of the best business schools in the country. But yeah, it was awesome. When I look at highlights and I see you guys on the 85 Bears, it's unbelievable to see the pace that you guys played at, the confidence. And you talked about that, like just being able to play and not think. It reminds me a lot, obviously you guys were on a different level, but in 2012, my experience playing with Lovie Smith, we were top 5 defense. I felt the same way, like we were just able to go out there and play.
Yeah.
And there's something about that when you're out there and you know that they're a talented offense, but you're going to be able to stop them, and they can't do anything about it. There's something about that.
Yeah, but on every level, but particularly in the NFL, you have to earn that.
You do.
And And the big difference between college and pro is there are guys who are 10 years older than you, who have a family and a couple kids, and you're like, gee,
grown men.
And no kidding. When I was playing Mercury Morris, I was with the Miami Dolphins initially.
Yep.
I ruptured my lung, so I didn't play the first preseason game. And at halftime, Mercury Morris was smoking not one but 2 cigarettes at a time. And I was like, whoa, these guys smoke. Yeah. And the Bears, Buffon smoked, Lionel Antoine, our offensive tackle, smoked, and you're like, wow.
It's crazy, right?
It is crazy. So there's a cultural, it's so much different.
Oh, yeah.
And I think the key is, though, when you finally get, zipping back and forth, we would go to the playoffs. Next year wouldn't go. And then when you really start developing that momentum, it's like, okay, we know that we're getting special. And Buddy Ryan would give us automatic front and coverages.
Yep.
So you need to know what the formation is, and that will dictate what the front is going to do and what the coverage is going to do. So you might go from an eye to a split motion and it lead to 3 or 4 different defenses, and you couldn't put us in a bad position.
Yep.
But if you made a mental error, it could be a huge one. And as bad as it is to miss a tackle or blow a coverage, whatever, you make too many mental errors and you wouldn't be on the field.
Exactly.
Yep. You owed it. And you
accountability. Accountability. That's the key.
You were at Soldier Field last night, right?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Yeah, I was out.
Did you feel, because last night this place went up for grabs when Roma Doomsday's pick came in?
Oh, yeah. I think people were relieved.
Are you feeling the same hysteria? Like, for Bears fans, we're going crazy right now. Are you feeling that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that they've made, there's something different. I think that the general manager, Poles, has been honest with the fans. I think he's a better communicator.
Agreed.
Because when you had Pace, he wouldn't say anything. It's like, I'm not an idiot. I'm paying a lot of money, and you're treating me like a fool. And so I think that Poles has treated the fans with respect. He's not going to give away any secrets.
Yep.
And, they've been very fortunate that they were in this position to get the number 1 pick in the draft. And, I've been reading where one of the positive things for Kansas City is their development of the lower rounds and making those productive players. And I think that as important as the draft is, we only have 4 picks this year, but we have a lot of guys, I think 8 from last year's team. But it's now, hey, you've got to develop these players. We don't want to be in the position of having a high draft choice next year. So, let's make sure that we're picking these, we're developing them, and I wish Matt and the coaching staff the best of luck. I would love to see, another Super Bowl winner here in Chicago.
This year, damn it.
Before I die.
All right, before you go, one word answer. The NFC Championship, the next time the Bears are, let's say, an NFC Championship in 5 years, the Bears are in it. Do you want it to be at Soldier Field or in Arlington Heights? Do you want it to be on the lakefront or in Arlington Heights?
I'm conflicted because I live in Lincoln Park, so I don't want to go all the way out to Arlington.
You don't want to take that. You can take a short Uber.
Even though they say there's a train that goes out there.
We don't want that. Soldier Field.
Carm's keeping it on the lakefront.
But I got to tell you, as a taxpayer, there are a lot of other priorities that need to be addressed with the city of Chicago as well.
Exactly.
So, I hope they get some resolution one way or the other.
Of course.
And you know what? Soldier Field, it isn't the field so much as getting into that stadium, parking.
It's a lot.
Drives me crazy. It takes me 20 minutes to go from like DePaul University on Fullerton all the way to the stadium, and then the moment you have to take that little turn right to get into the north parking lot, that might take another 30 or 40 minutes.
Yeah.
It just...
Gary, you mean they don't pull out the chopper for you? Come on, man.
That's we got.
You're one of the greats, man. They got to pull out the chopper, get you in there before the game. You don't got to drive.
Yeah.
Hey, Gary, first class for being here tonight. We so appreciate it.
Thank you, Gary.
Awesome to have you on the show.
Gary Fencik, ladies and gentlemen.
It's nice to meet you guys, too.
Man, it's an honor. Yes, I've heard
Thank you,
so much
Gary.
about
Good
you.
to see you again, man.
We all silly like the mayor.